Hi y'all, this is Jace and this is what I read for the last 2 weeks. I took a little bit of a break from the long form of this video last week as I was out of town and I wanted to be really present for that experience. So you get double episodes today, bonus points, gold stars if you make it to the end. So if you remember at the end of my last one of these, I was really bummed at the end of Iron Flame. I was having a hard time. I was picking up and putting down books, just kind of leaving them on read. And I needed something to kind of cleanse the palate. I loved Fourth Wing. I was really excited at the end of that. It was, oh my gosh, I want to know what's happening next. And this one, no spoilers, but it definitely has a very different tone. So I needed something new, and that was actually a continuation of something else. Scarlet by Marissa Mayer. It is book 2 of the Lunar Chronicles. So if you've never heard of the Lunar Chronicles or you haven't listened to my review of Cinder, which I read earlier in the month at the recommendation of my producer Sephi, who you met in the definitions episode, and you'll actually get a whole podcast with her. So I'm really excited about that. Then so Scarlet is the next book in that series, and all of these books are kind of loosely based off of fairy tales. Cinder is Cinderella, and Scarlet is Little Red Riding Hood, which I thought would be kind of lame. Was not. It was a really good continuation of the story. You're getting a lot more perspectives of people and this world that they're building and what's going on. I really liked it. They're long books. They're, longer than I kind of expected them to be for the YA that they are. But if you are looking for something just to kind of cleanse the palate where there's no real adult love story, yeah, it's YA, no adult love story. These two have been really great. Yeah. The next book that I read was Bitter Medicine by Mia Tsai, and y'all, do not sleep on this book. I picked it up at my library in the new releases section. It was on a bookshelf, and I had no idea if it was a romance novel. I had never heard of this author. Not surprising, it's her first book, but I loved the cover. I hope you love it too. And this was such a great read. It was it's so diverse in terms of its cast, in terms of its world. It's about fae, but it's lots of cultures. So it's not that kind of Eurocentric that I'm used to in most English fiction that you find in the US. The main character is Taiwanese, as is the author. There are elves, there are just folklore from all over the world, an incredibly diverse cast of characters, and it was not what I was expecting, but everything that I needed. My only critique of this book, especially because, oh my god, the sex was so great, y'all. The sex was not terribly explicit, not like on my spice meter, it's probably 1, 2, but what I loved about this book was the communication and the connection that they had, and really how they treated each other during their intimate moments. But the critique that I would have about this book is she did a great thing for those of you who are bilingual. It's lingual. It's really common to just kind of go back and forth between the languages you speak, especially if you're speaking with family members, people speak both languages with you. And there are characters in this book. It was great. For my English speaking self, I wanted a footnote for the other languages that were used. I felt like I really was able to catch up in context, but there's that part of me that just wasn't sure. And I read the physical book, and so it's not like I could just click on it like you do in a Kindle and pick it up. So that's my only critique about that book. Go read it. I need to talk about this book to someone else. This is gonna be a really short review. I read Slay by Laura K. Hamilton. Laura K. Hamilton is an author that I do not have rational thoughts about. And maybe I'll do an entire episode about her. I don't know. I don't know if I can. The best that I can compare it to is me to Anita Blake is like people who still watch Grey's Anatomy like up until the end on Thursdays or like first thing on Friday. Like that is my love of this series and love of this author, but also like the emotional trauma that she gives me with some of these books. So that's all I'm going to say about Slay. If you're an Anita Blake fan, let's talk. If you're not an Anita Blake fan, go read the first few books. You'll have seen my copy of Guilty Pleasures in an earlier social media post. It's gross now because I've read it that many times, but I can't talk about Slay. Fall of Ruin and Wrath was the last book that I read 2 weeks ago, and I almost wish that I hadn't. I didn't do my due diligence with this author, Jennifer L. Armentrout. Yes, I looked over at my notes to make sure that I said it correctly, or as close to the spelling as I can assume. It was the book of hers that came up first from my Libby account. I didn't know what I was getting into, so I was like, let's not spend money on this one. And I know she has an entire series, and I'm pretty sure it's finished, so I have that on my holds list as well. But this book was great. I really enjoyed this book. Something about this book, and you'll hear me say this, is books where sex work essentially is part of it, I find do a really good job of communicative sex and destigmatizing what other people want in their sex life. And I'm sure that's part of just like not having issue or not taking issue with sex work in general, but the people who write sex work into their books, I find, really do a great job of not yucking someone's yum. I thought the world was really interesting. It was a little hard to get into sometimes with fantasy books. Like it takes me a while with the names and the this and the rules of the world, but the relationships were really fun. I loved Lys. I thought that she was a really interesting character, and like, don't get me wrong, I think that her relationship with like the prince is like great, but I actually loved her relationship with her best friend who's gay. There's a lot of good like queer positive energy. She and another of the word, they don't use the word concubines, but concubines, they have like a little bit of a flirt fondle going on, and I love it. It's not like, oh this or oh that. It's great. I thought it was a really lovely example of that. I think I might need to buy this book because I might have to read it again. Whew, that was a lot for that week. A little bit less the week after. I wanted something a little bit lighter, a little less dense after Fall of Ruin and Wrath. Really, fantasy sometimes just makes my brain, I love it, I do love it, but I have to suspend my disbelief so often with fantasy that sometimes I just need a palate cleanser. And it was Love Redesigned. And the reason I actually ended up getting this book is because I saw on TikTok that, or maybe it was Instagram, quite honestly, someone posted in this book that they have footnotes. The characters often speak in Spanish, as they should. They are like Latinx people. They should speak in Spanish. Obviously, they would to each other and to their families. And I loved the idea of footnotes. I read a book earlier, Ramon and Julieta. I will probably put it on the blog. It was a really great book, but there was a lot of Spanish. I just don't speak any other language, and that's my fault. It's my fault, but it also meant that book was really hard, and I had to put it down often to pick up my phone and translate, and then I saw my notifications, and so it just kind of interrupted the flow of the book. So I really appreciated the footnotes, read it, I liked it. I thought it was very sweet. I thought the sex was very communicative. It was hot. I thought that was hot. And because of that, I actually, you know what, wait, I have another book instead, but I really enjoyed it. And it's new, it's by Lauren Asher, and I thought it was a really fun thing. But like, honestly, like, how do you become a billionaire? Is it the app, or is it your construction business? Because like, no one building houses on a lake town outside Chicago is a billionaire from the construction. So like that part confused me. All right, continuing on like the palate cleanser or stress of the holidays, nothing too deep going on. I then read Cress, which is the third book in the Lunar Chronicles. And this is where it gets really funny because I read Cinder and I read Scarlet from my library, and then I got Fairest, but I was confused about the reading order. I was told it was third from the library, but it didn't feel like it was when I opened it on Kindle, it was like book 4. I'm like, what's going on? And then it turns out they're all on Kindle Unlimited. So great. I then left Fairest on my library app and opened up Cress, which is, according to Marissa Mayer, this is the correct reading order. I went to her website and looked. Here it is for you. But so I wanted to read them in the order that she suggests. So that meant Cress, which is based on Rapunzel. And twists and turns, y'all. I really, again, this series, you're probably going to see like one every other week as we get into December, because I have something planned for December. I can't decide if I'm happy about it or not, but there we go. It's planned. I really did enjoy the continuation of this story. I think that Cinder as a character is fascinating, and the characters of Lunars, if you've read the book, the Lunars, these people are the bad guys, essentially, for better or for worse. And it really is a good example of what happens when you give someone absolute power, and a culture that is based on power and control over others. It's really scary, and it made me think, especially right now with life and after so many fluffy things. Okay, final book. We made it, y'all, is The Fine Print. So as I was kind of delving into Love Redesigned posts after I read the book, I noticed some people celebrating that she brought in characters from her other series, from another series, Lauren Asher, and I enjoyed Love Redesigned. I should go back and say, like, one of the things I liked about Love Redesigned is that it wasn't a bad guy who changed for a girl. Who's like, oh, look, this woman, magically, all my bad habits are gone. It was someone who, like, I felt like work was done on both sides in Love Redesigned for these characters and for their relationship. And I appreciated that it wasn't like, oh, she's the good person, she's gonna change her man, which I find in a lot of MF, male, female relationships is the case. And like, y'all, you don't change people ever, ever, ever. Which brings me to how I feel about The Fine Print. I did not love it as much as Love Redesigned, and it's for that specific reason. Rowan he's like, I'm an asshole and I don't think about anyone and I've got baggage. Absolutely. Like, you have baggage, and that's like legitimate. Everyone's got baggage. Not everyone has your baggage, but everyone has baggage, and it changes us and it makes us better or worse or whatever. But like, you can't suddenly be like, oh man, maybe I should give people health insurance and paid vacations because I met a woman who needs health insurance and would like a paid vacation. Like, he was too much of an asshole. I didn't want him to get her. Like, that just didn't appeal to me. I was like, no, girl, run far. You don't deserve him. And now that I'm in the thick of it, I'm probably going to finish the next two, because Rowan is the character I didn't meet and they didn't talk about in Love Redesigned. And the other two, Callahan and Declan, totally get mentioned. So I think I want to hear their stories more than I might do Rowan's, because I don't care about him. One of the things I did really like about The Fine Print was the conversations around equity that were had within this book. So Zara has a sister with Down syndrome. I'm not spoiling anything. There's a lot of conversation about living with a disability and how places do not put people outside of what is considered normal into consideration, whether it's having a sensory conscious time at the theme park where they work at, whether it's costumes that can go on wheelchairs or be used with crutches or things of that nature. So I did like that they drew attention to that. But in terms of the story, I'm like, nah, Zara, run. You don't deserve him. You could do so much better. That's all for today. Thank you for joining this week's What I Read. You can find me on social media at Jayce, Jayce, Reads Romance on both TikTok and Instagram. For all the updates, blog posts, podcast notes, and more, go to JayceReadsRomance.com. This is Jayce, holding space for you.